This episode changed the way I think about grief, not as something to fix or move past, but as something that reshapes the way we love, support, and show up for one another. This is a conversation on trauma, advocacy, loss, and the quiet strength required to keep living after unimaginable heartbreak. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Soft Power Project. There's a difference between understanding trauma professionally and living it personally. Joanna Stokinger spent decades working in victim advocacy and criminal justice and eventually landing her dream role as a homicide victim advocate. But in 2021, everything changed after the devastating loss of her grandson to abusive head trauma. And what makes Joanna's story especially powerful is not only what she survived, but how that experience transformed the way she understands trauma, healing, and what survivors truly need from the people around them. Thank you, Joanna, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for just being here and speak about this. I know this must be so difficult, but I believe that with your stories and insight, you get to really help a lot of people.
That's my goal.
I know that you work with a lot of victims. I know we briefly talked about this before the recording about your current role as the advocate for the Maine mass shooting victim, correct?
Yes, correct.
And I mean, how many victims or how many people do you usually talk to or kind of help them on a daily basis?
It depends. Daily, I talk to probably 3 or 4, depending. Sometimes we have support groups, so we'll see more people on that day, or things like a commemoration event will come up, like the year or the 2-year date. We don't like to call it an anniversary because it's not really something to
Yeah.
celebrate. So on those, when things like that start to come up, I talk to a lot more people. We have at the Maine Resiliency Center, we have seen over 700 impacted members of the community, first responders, direct victims' families. So when you think of it as like a ripple effect, the event doesn't just affect those that were there that night. It affects the entire community. Even people that don't know someone that was impacted directly. They were locked down, in our town
Mm.
for a few days, and all of that is affects them. It's a trauma to them. So there's a lot of people that we help there.
And if you don't mind, would you describe a little bit how you help them? Like, let's say on a Monday or any day, like what does that look like for you? What sort of problems or things that you get to kind of help them with?
Sure. So there's a lot of different ways. We provide one-on-one support. So if someone just needs to call and talk, then I'm available to talk to them. If they're having a bad day or they just had a panic attack, they can call me or text me and if I'm available to go to them, I can go to them. I do home visits with people that aren't comfortable or just can't because they have kiddos that, run around the house and they
Mm.
need someone to come talk to them there. Several people work remotely and they only have like a lunch hour during the day and they can't travel to see us at the Resiliency Center. So, I do a lot of one-on-one support. Most states, Maine included, has a program called the Victims Compensation Department through the state of Maine, through the Attorney General's office. And that is a fund that provides financial support to victims of violent crime. For example, medical bills that they need help covering, or therapy bills, or have they lost wages because of the event. So there's this fund that helps those costs get reimbursed. Funeral costs when someone is killed by homicide.
Mm.
So a lot of times I have a very good relationship with the victims compensation department at the AG's office, and someone will call me and say, I got this bill. They're sending me to collections. I don't understand. So I can reach out to victims comp, send them the bill, help so that it's like one less thing off the plate of the individual that's going through the trauma. Like, we have a book club coming up, so I'm running a book club, and we're reading Remarkably Bright Creatures, and there's a wonderful, underlying themes of grief and resilience, and, so we're gonna talk about those kinds of things in the book club. We have community nights where we gather and people come, and over spring break, we had like a spring fling kind of thing. Kids could come and they painted plant pots, and then they planted flowers so that they could see the flowers grow and be resilient. And so we bring those themes into a lot of the activities. We support folks out in the community. For example, our shooting occurred at two different locations. One of them was a bowling alley, and it was youth bowling night, and the
Mm.
other was at a bar and grill, and there was a cornhole tournament. So we go and support folks at the cornhole tournaments that they hold now, and we support them because we know that those things can be triggering. We went back to the bowling alley with survivors for the first time, and we hold events there so people can come and experience it with support present. So those are some of the things that we do.
Wow, it's incredible. And I mean, I would love to, ask more about that because that's, yeah, just like I'm so fascinated and you're talking about book clubs. I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. But for now, if it's okay, I would like to kind of ask you about kind of the events that changed everything for you back in 2021 when you got the call about your grandson and how that shifted from you as an advocate to the recipient of the
Yeah.
support.
So I think what's interesting about my perspective as well is a lot of victim advocates go into the field because they were survivors themselves. So domestic violence victim advocates are all often previous survivors of domestic violence. Same with sexual assault victim advocates. That wasn't the case with me. I started my career in a small prosecution office in Florida when we lived down there. I started out as the secretary in the domestic violence unit, and then I was promoted up to victim witness clerk, which was in 2002. It was not the beginning of the victim advocacy that's been around for a while, but it was a time when I think our positions weren't seen as paraprofessionals. We were seen as administrative back then. So we assisted victims in going to court and things like that. I began my training. There's a 40-hour advanced victim services course that they send you to, and I took that. And then I went on to get my degree in criminal justice, and so that's kind of where I started, and I ended up working in the homicide unit at the Maine Attorney General's office, and unlike a lot of state Maine is small. We're not a highly populated state. We're very it's like one big small town is kind of how people describe Maine, and there are 3 victim advocates in that office for the entire state. So we were traveling all over the state every time a homicide occurred. And in Maine, when I started with this job, I would say 25 to 30 at the most, 20 to 30 homicides a year in Maine. And when you think
Mm.
about like some places have that in a day, right? So we were a small, tight unit, and I was working specifically with homicide cases. I'd had a few, shaken baby cases, abusive head trauma cases. And I was taking a nap on a Sunday afternoon, and I missed a bunch of calls from my daughter, and my husband brought me the phone, and I see my daughter and her husband's face, ex-husband now, emergency lights everywhere, and she's saying Anthony, her son, is going to the hospital. Something happened. She doesn't know what's going on. And that kind of started my journey of awful, terrible regrowth, I guess,
Mm.
out of necessity. And because of my career at this point, so it's 2021, at this point, I'd been in criminal justice and victim advocacy since 2002. So I've been, it's been a while.
Yeah.
And in that time, I had since gotten my master's degree in criminology. So I was working with homicide victims. I felt myself to be very trauma informed. I took a lot of extra trainings. I learned everything I could about brain chemistry and how trauma manifests, physically, and how to understand folks that are going through that. And when my daughter was at the hospital with her son, she
Hmm.
started saying things that I recognized as this wasn't just a sick baby, right? She was saying, retinal hemorrhaging, subdural hematoma, like all the words that
Mm,
she had no idea what those things meant, but I knew that a 6-week-old baby doesn't get those injuries on his own.
right.
So that's when I kind of shifted my focus from worried grandmother to advocate. And then I think I experienced this is like a little nugget I like to throw in is, I'd never had a traumatic event in my life like that for my own family. My dad had passed away from cancer. So I'd experienced loss. My dad was a funeral director. So I grew up in a funeral home. I grew up knowing about death and I was I don't want to say comfortable with death, but it didn't scare me. I wasn't like one of those folks that had never been to a funeral. I knew a lot about it. And I've been working where you meet people at their worst for a long time on their worst day, right?
Mhm,
And I remember when all this happened, like, I didn't have a passport, and at the time they were in Germany. Her ex-husband was stationed in Germany. I didn't have a passport. It was COVID, so the
mm,
EU was basically shut down. The generosity of people that didn't know Tessa, that didn't know Anthony, that knew me, that knew my husband, that knew like, from 10 years ago that knew me, were, like,
mhm,
throwing money at us to help us get through this, because I had
right.
to leave. I had to go to Germany.
Yeah.
So, I ended up getting a passport in a day because I went to my state representative and they helped me get a passport. Like, it was just
Wow.
amazing the people at work took a collection and bought my ticket to Germany. It was like $1,400 for a one-way ticket to Germany. Germany and the US Army
Mhm,
made it so that I didn't have to quarantine. I was able to go right to the hospital to be with my daughter and my grandson. So, lots of things you realize that humanity we see all kinds of terrible things in the news every day. It's like we're inundated with sad and bad, and I saw a lot of good in the midst of my, like, awful time. So, that kind of really affected me as well. So I get there, and 3 weeks later, he died.
were you able to jump into the advocate role for your daughter, or was it difficult? Yeah.
It wasn't hard. One of the things I say, mothers do a lot for their children, and my daughter will say 100 times her dad's her best friend. And I'm like, "Dude," like, you know what I mean? Like, she's like a daddy's girl and stuff. But she didn't ask for him to come. She asked for me, I think because she knew that I knew how to talk to people, I knew how to deal with people, like, I could help her navigate that, when I could help her get what she needed when she didn't know what she needed, and I think subconsciously she knew that. She knew that, her dad is very shy, he wasn't gonna get up in people's faces and say, "This is information that we need, and we need this now, please," like, those kinds of things. So, what I think is that in the beginning, I didn't mind being that for her because she didn't have anyone to be that. There wasn't an official criminal case yet. She was in the hospital with him. There was a protection order. Her ex-husband wasn't allowed to be around. So I was basically there. It was really hard for her to sit with Anthony all day, every day. And so I knew she needed rest and sleep. So it comforted her to know that I was in the room sitting with Anthony so that she could sleep and she could rest. It was easy for me in the beginning. When it got difficult for me, and I kind of got a little bit angry about it, was when she had a victim liaison before the trial, and they weren't trauma informed, and they weren't a good advocate, and I had to step in, and at that point, I was a grieving grandmother, and I was there to support my daughter, but I shouldn't have had to advocate for her. I shouldn't have had to say, "She deserves this as a victim of crime." That should have been the victim liaisons. And so that really impacted how I moved forward in not just in the at the time, but how I moved forward in my career when I came back.
Right, right. And I understand this must be really difficult to kind of think back, but I think as, a lot of listeners were not familiar with that kind of work. When someone's not trauma informed and walk into that situation, I mean, what would be the impact of their basically lack of knowledge? Yeah.
Yeah, I can give you a couple examples. So, they one of the things is in Maine specifically, and I know that not every state has the resources to do this, but when a homicide happens, we are there that day or the next day to be with the family and to explain to them the criminal justice process, explain to them what's going to happen, go to court with them, be with them, explain through the whole process, and do things like apply for victims' compensation for them, and do things like attend the funeral so that they know someone from the prosecuting attorney's
Right.
office appreciates their loss. And that doesn't happen in every case because sometimes it just can't if you're running from case to case, but it's assisting them with helping them with the funeral, because when a trauma like this happens to you, and if you think about, even most people have experienced death, a parent, a grandparent, a friend. A lot of people have experienced loss to illness or accident. Loss to homicide is something completely different because it's wholly preventable. It didn't have to happen, and someone is responsible for that death. Another person's hands caused the death of your loved one. And so when you think about that, is not a linear kind of grief, because your grandfather dies, he's 87 years old, I don't know, you go to the funeral, you reminisce, you talk about, but you know that that person lived a good life. In homicide, especially when there's a trial, you're starting to you're starting to work through the process, and then you get a letter in the mail that says court, there's a court case, or you get a phone call, there's a court case next Monday, the person wants bail, we've got to go to the, so it's like picking that wound over and over and over and over again and starting back from scratch with your trauma. And so it's, I don't want to say the word, no, it's not a traditional type of grief. A role of a trauma informed advocate recognizes the difference, is trained to know when a grieving mother is screaming at you, they're not screaming at you, right? It's not directed at you. It's their body reacting to something that they can't handle, and it's the way that they, or if you are encountering a family member who won't talk to you, won't answer the phone, won't engage, and it's frustrating to you as a professional, but you know the reasons they're doing that is they're deep in their grief and their brain is not working properly. And so not knowing those things and moving into a case where you're dealing with someone who is so impacted physically and emotionally by their trauma, you never know how it's going to come out in every different individual. Everybody reacts differently. People that have substance use issues are going to react differently when their loved one is murdered. People that have experienced a previous homicide in their life are going to react differently. It's just all kinds of things. Brain chemistry, like whether or not they have a support system, those all impact how people react to their trauma. So, not knowing those things and not being able to react and engage with people that are at the worst moments of their lives and can't, some people just aren't equipped to handle that influx of all that, and so it comes out sometimes at you as a professional, and being able to not react, being able to remain calm, being able to recognize that they sometimes can't help the way they're acting. It's literally a physiological reaction to what their brain is saying, this is danger, react or run or stop or whatever. So, I think not knowing that can really harm if you yell back. Like, they're not gonna come to you. They're not gonna trust you. So there's a lot that is involved with recognizing. Most victim advocates do a 40-hour course, and then they have mentors that help them. They work collaboratively with their teams, and those are the ways that people kind of enhance their trauma-informed care. And you get a lot of people, like in every, I think, kind of career, you get people that are there for a paycheck. And unfortunately, survivors and victims can see that. And if they know you're not passionate about your work or that you don't really care about them, they're going to be different with you. They're not going to, so there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just, I understand that you need self care, the end. I think, and I think one of the things that I say a lot, when I'm speaking is intellectually, I knew all these things. It's most beneficial for you as the professional and for the survivor that you're working with to know these things, because if you don't, you can harm them later. But it's language choice. Some people don't want to be referred to as a victim. So you have to think in your mind, okay, this person doesn't want to be called a victim. Statute calls them a victim. The law says this is a victim of crime. So you have to be cognizant of what that person wants. If they say, I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor, then you modify your approach and you refer to them as a survivor. So there's just a lot of things. Some folks don't want a phone call from you saying that something's happening because they got a phone call that their loved one was murdered. They would rather get a text saying, there's some news in the case. Can you give me a call? And then they call you. Some people don't want to know about any of the court dates until it's the important ones when they have to be there. And they let you know that. So you have to kind of, it's not just one size fits all. It can't be, because people aren't one size fits all. And I think if you don't do that, it really impacts. I saw it in our case. My daughter was very, very mistrustful of her victim liaison. She was not, didn't trust her, didn't. And because she saw her do things differently than she had watched me in my career her whole life. She had seen me be kind to people, give people the benefit of the doubt, and she didn't get that with her. It was kind of all business, and did some really harmful things that I don't know that my daughter will ever recover from. And I don't know that she knows the impact she had on our family in a very negative way.
How has your own experience reshaped the way now you support others?
It didn't change kind of like how I approached my job, but it changed how I thought more about the language I use. I thought more about asking people what they needed as opposed to saying, this is the process. You know, one of the things that happened in my daughter's case was, so in Maine, like if there's a homicide, let's say that you're the victim, you're a family member of someone that was murdered, and I come and meet with you, and then it's time for trial, and you have to testify. Let's say you have to testify because you either were there or you were the last person to see your loved one, or you have to identify the photo of your loved one because part of the trial is you have to prove that the victim is who the person was. So we sit down with you, and I did this with every family member, and I would lay out, when appropriate, I would lay out, these are the exhibits that are gonna be introduced, right? So, here's the picture that you're gonna be shown, and then I would say, like, I describe the photo, and I say, "I'm gonna show the photo to you now," right? Like, so you, like, prepare them for, this is what they're gonna see. You don't just slap a autopsy photo on and say, "There's your, is that your person?" Right? That's not trauma informed. Um, you sit there with them, and while the prosecutor is, like, preparing them for their testimony, you're there with them, and you're, supporting them. My daughter was in the room with the prosecutors, and they pulled out photos of her son, which she was prepared for. I had prepared her for all this, that this was gonna happen. And the victim liaison got up and left the room and said she couldn't look at those pictures because it was a baby and it was too hard for her. Yeah. So, the problem with that is her job is to be there and support, in this case, the mother of a deceased baby.
Yeah.
If it's too hard for you and you can't look at it, you don't need to be in this job,
My God.
right? So that was one of the instances, and of course, because I was technically listed as a witness, I couldn't be in there with my daughter to support her. It was,
Ugh,
luckily, the prosecutors were wonderful, and they helped her through
ugh.
it, but her role was to support my daughter.
Yeah.
When I first spoke to this victim liaison, she said to me, "I'm so glad that you're a victim advocate, because I've never done that. This is my first time in this role,
Jeez.
and I didn't even know if I wanted to take this case because it was a dead baby." And I'm like, "Yep, it's our baby. Like, it's our I and I was like, "My role here," and I said to her, I was like, "Wow, my role is a grandmother in this case. My role is not an advocate." And so I kind of silently just prepared my daughter for things that were gonna happen. So now I'm very cognizant of how I speak to people, and I was before. I don't wanna say I was bad at my job before, because it wasn't that. I'm just
Mm,
different now because I know. what it's like.
Yeah.
And but I don't come into it now saying, "I've been where you are, I'm part of the club." You
Yeah.
said, and it's appropriate, especially when people say to you, like, "You don't know what I'm going through." You're right, I don't.
Mm.
I do not know. But I am also a survivor of a homicide victim, right? I'm a surviving family member of a homicide victim. So I know where you are in generally. And not a lot of homicide advocates can say that.
And since we're talking about this, I think on social media, there are a lot of information about, oh, how do you support someone who is going through grief or having a bad day, what to say, what not to say. And I'm wondering for this specific trauma, homicide, this kind of cases, like if I were to help someone or want to support someone, but I don't really know what to say, even if it's well intentioned, it may cause some damage. What would you advise us to kind of navigate in this kind of situation?
I think honesty is really up there for me. Like it's absolutely appropriate to say, I do not know what you're feeling. I don't know how to help you. I don't know what to say. I think people appreciate that more than I'm so sorry for your loss. And I think they appreciate when you say, I'm so sorry for your loss. And I think sometimes survivors don't know what they want, right? One of the things that I talk about is I'm not going to invite someone over to my house to do my dishes because I'm too far in my grief today to clean my house. But if someone says to me, can I bring you a coffee today? I can say, that would be awesome. I would love that. And then, can I come in today? Can I come visit you today? I'm gonna tell you if today's not the day, right? So I think leaving it up to the survivor and just recognizing like, a lot of people get support early on, and then a month in, 2 months in, their lives continue as they were, right? Your life will never continue as it was, right? And so, I think something that, some people that are in grief maybe y and I'm sure we've all kind of experienced this too, you just can't like, showering is a challenge. Like, getting out of bed is a challenge, and so I think saying to someone like, "Can I come over and bring you a coffee?" "Yes," and then you're chatting with them while you're having a coffee and, they say something like, "My body hurts, I can't even make my bed, I can't even change my sheets, and I feel so gross." So you say, "Do you mind if I change your sheets?" "I'll change your sheets." It's just little things like that, or, it depends on the person, like, if it's my best friend, they're gonna come over, and I don't care if they just start doing my dishes,
Mm,
right? But I think it's asking permission. Consent is a big thing. Some people don't want you to barge in and take over and do the things for them. They wanna sit in their grief for a while, but sometimes they don't know what they need. They just know that they need something, and I think waiting for them to ask for something is often not gonna happen, right? It's it can be shameful for people, like, if my daughter said to me, "Mom, I don't even wanna shower or wash my hair." I'd be like, "Okay, let's go in the sink and wash your hair." Right? Like, just little stuff, but the day-to-day that we think about that comes so easily when someone's deep in that trauma doesn't come easily, doesn't come easily. I mean, we experienced a lot with my daughter where she just shut her I brought her back home with us after, and what struck me was, so they had to keep Anthony to do an autopsy, and so when we flew back to the States, he didn't fly on the same plane with us, right? So that was really hard for her. And then we get home and they told us that they were gonna have a soldier fly back with him so that his body wouldn't be alone. That didn't get approved, so they put him on a plane and he came home alone. And to some people, they're like, "Well, it's just a body." But for my daughter, that was her son, and she wanted to make sure that her son was back with her safely. So, one of the other things that the victim advocate should have done that I should have known, but because I was in my grief too, I didn't explain to Tessa, my daughter, that this could happen. Whenever there's an autopsy, if there's any damage to the body, which is often happens when a homicide occurs, they have to keep pieces of that person as evidence. for the trial or for if the defense wants to, you know, do testing on it or whatever. Well, they kept his eyes and part of his brain. And so I didn't share that that could happen with her because it didn't occur to me. And also, I wasn't her victim advocate. Like, it shouldn't have been
Yeah.
my role to tell her that. And then she gets a letter saying, "This is what we kept after the trial, after whatever. If you want them, you can have them." And she was like, "What do you mean I didn't get my whole baby?" Right? So that for her was a huge reharming, right? And so it's things like that, just thinking about, and you never know. I mean, there's always gonna be little gaps. Victim advocates aren't perfect, but I think survivors can tell when they're trying to be, trying to do their best and they actually care. So,
It sounds to me that I think act of service is really important because I think most of us probably don't really know what to say. And like you said, the survivor themselves may not even know what they wanted to hear. But I think act of service would be something that's really important,
yeah.
right?
I
Yeah.
think one thing that I can tell you, there are a lot of things they don't wanna hear, and they can tell you what those things are. My daughter didn't wanna hear, "You're young, you can have another baby," and she heard that a lot. Did not wanna hear that, right? And I think people were well-meaning, meaning your life isn't over, there is hope for you, but that falls flat with a mother who just lost her baby, right? And even now, 5 years later, she doesn't wanna hear that, right? So I think maybe, and I understand that for loved ones and those that care about someone that's going through a trauma like this, they want to do the best for them. They want to help, but we don't know how. It's uncomfortable. We don't like to be in uncomfortable spaces. Therapists tell us, "You have to sit with this. This is uncomfortable." I don't want to sit with this, right? It's the same in real life every day, not just sitting in a therapist's chair. It's uncomfortable for me, so I don't want to approach that person and offer something because I don't know if I'll say something wrong. I think the best thing to say is, "You might not know what you need. I'm gonna keep asking if I can bring you a coffee until you tell me, stop asking me, I don't want a coffee," right? Or one day they'll say, "You know what? I would really like you to come over and bring me a smoothie." Like, you know what I mean? "I just wanna tell you I don't drink coffee, so quit offering me coffee, but bring me a smoothie." It's just things like that. A lot of it is think about what you would want, and it's hard to put yourself in other shoes, but I think that's kind of part of it. It's just being aware that we're all human beings. We're all going to make mistakes, but deep down, we all have the capacity to love and care for each other. I think sometimes just knowing that that person is willing to do those things is what's enough.
Got it. And I think one thing you pointed out that's really important to understand is that it's not linear. It gets
Nope.
retriggered and yeah, it takes time. And so I think for people who want to support and to help them, to help their loved ones, it's important to understand that it does take time and you're just going to have to ask and offer help and again, right?
Yeah, and I think sometimes you might get in your head and say, well, they keep saying no, so I'm not going to offer anymore because they really don't want it. But maybe ask less frequently, and maybe someday they'll say yes. Because what if you missed that one yes, right? Like, what if you missed that one time because you stopped asking? And I think that there's a way to do it without being like every day, "I'm bringing you a coffee, I'm bringing you a coffee, I'm bringing," like Tessa now is open to a lot of people. She talks about her son now. Like, there was a time where there were no pictures of him in our home because she shut down. She wanted to pretend she never had a baby, she was never married, this part of her life never happened because it hurt too much. And we had to just let her live in that world for a little while, which was difficult for her dad and I. We were grieving. And this is something too that I think people don't recognize is Tessa was the primary victim in that. Like, well, Anthony was the primary victim, but in terms of survivors, Tessa's the primary victim, it was her son. But lots of people were impacted by that. Like, I worked in a homicide unit with attorneys and support staff that were working actively on many abusive head trauma cases. Like, so in the state of Maine in 2021, in like a 4-month period, 5 children under the age of 4 were murdered by a parent or a caregiver. And so when I came back from Germany, My boss, in her trauma informed way, said to me, "You can't take any of these new cases, these baby cases. These you don't right now." So, and that was so responsible of her. But what made it hard for me was there's 3 of us in that unit, 3 advocates. So that meant the other 2 advocates were getting all those cases, which made their jobs even more difficult. And the people in that unit that loved me and loved my daughter would think about us when they had a new baby case. So it was impacting them, even though they weren't a part of our biological family. So I think that recognizing that trauma is from one incident can be widespread at different degree, different level.
Shifting it back to you, is that how did this experience change your relationship with yourself?
Ooh, and this is probably not something people really like to talk about themselves, right? I think it did a couple of things. It made me a better advocate because I can relate to the way people feel when this happens, when they get that news, when they're experiencing this, even if it's a different kind of homicide or a different. But it also, I think, took a little bit away from me
Mhm.
because now when I do my job, it's so beneficial that I have this personal experience, but also I'm still constantly thinking about my personal experience, which I would probably there's not going to be a day that Tessa wakes up and says, "I had a son." Like the first thing she thinks about when she wakes up in the morning is Anthony's not here with me, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's helped me relate better. It's helped me even more think about the language that I use and even more think about when I promise somebody that I'm going to call them, I call them. Like I try not to say, and if I do, then I'm there's a reason. Like I was on an airplane as I don't know, whatever, if I don't call them back or whatever. Like I also haven't been able to fully grieve my grandson on a personal level because when I came back, my purpose was because of this to be a better advocate and to learn more and to train other advocates. I've done several webinars and stuff about how not to reharm, but I feel like sometimes I think I wonder what it would have been like if I wasn't in this career and I was just able to grieve my grandson the way I deserved to grieve him. And I'm not saying that I'm upset about that that's the path my life has taken, right? Because I'm very grateful that I have this platform now and I can,
Mm.
share that it's important how we speak to survivors and how we deal with survivors. And but I also know that I didn't get the way to personally grieve him as a grandmother. Partly because I was my daughter's advocate and that was first and foremost, right? And partly because I came back to work right away and I had to do the things. I think that every now and then I have a sad day and I'm like, this is not a good day. I think we all have things, but and it feels a little yucky to say I'm better because of it. It just feels like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No.
I would go back to being the same advocate I was back then because I know I was a good one and have Anthony, you know?
It's confusing and complicated.
Yes, it is. And it's not the same for everyone.
Yeah. And I was, describing your job and terrible thing happened and immediately you had to put on the hat and as a grandmother, as an advocate for your daughter and going back to your job. And I was just wondering, what about you? I mean,
That's a question that my therapist asks me all the time. I think one of the really great things is and I loved my role at the AG's office. I loved what I did. I was gonna retire from that job. It was my dream job, which is a little
Mhm.
bit weird to say that homicide was my dream job, but it was like
Okay.
the most violent cases, you're helping families through the worst moments of their lives, and I cherish that I had that role. I've never really been the type to put myself first. I think mothers are Most mothers tend to be that way. And I didn't recognize how important putting myself first every now and then is. So, and we throw around self care. When I started my career as a victim advocate, nobody cared about my self care. You know what I mean? Like we had court, we had things, we had to do the things. And I think now one of the great things about social media and our access to everything is that we know now, because of everything that's out there and all the research that's been done, is that filling your cup so that you have a full cup to give is very important. Or putting your oxygen mask on first before someone else's is very important. But oftentimes in careers like this, there's not time to do that. There's another murder, there's another court date, there's another, right? And so I think one of the benefits of the role I'm in now is we have a very small team. Staff wellness is very high up on the list, and we check
Okay.
in with each other often. We're very supportive of each other. And I'm not going to say that the homicide unit at the AG's office wasn't supportive to me. They loved me. I loved them. But the state of Maine ultimately could not care less about me. And I don't mean that in a glib way, but they're an organization. They're a machine that has to keep running. So when I was not there anymore, when I left and said I have to stop, they filled me my position. Like I was replaceable. And what I came to realize is that in my life, in my family, in my community, I'm not replaceable, right? There's no other me. There's not another me. So I have to maintain my wellness, and I'm not great at it. I will be the first to tell you. And I think most nurses, social workers, victim advocates, law enforcement, they are going to tell you, take, I don't put myself first. I don't have a role that I can do that. Like, I can't be like, today's about me, right? But I think it's important to do little things that add up to big things. Like,
Mhm.
I get my nails done every 2 weeks. It sounds simple, right? It's in our budget line. My husband's like, "What time's your nail appointment today?" Like, he knows that it's in our budget line.
Mhm.
It's in the grand scheme of things, it's not that much money out of our life, and I feel good when my nails are done. I feel like I'm presentable. It's for me, but it makes me feel like I can present myself, right? And that I can show up. And so, also, like, I have a little bit of a fluff romance book
Yeah.
love. Like, I
Yeah.
read the smutty stuff, yeah. And I don't care, like, it's I like it, it's fun, it's not true crime,
Ye
it's not homicide, it's not XYZ. I don't have to think about what I'm listening to. There's, like, 3 tropes, they all like, it's the same story over and over again, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But it gives I have an hour commute back and forth to work, so that's what I do on my hour commute, is I listen to romance novel. And then I come home and I'm, like, not in that ball of, like, exhaustion or, like, whatever. And so I think it's just recognizing, I take vacations. I never really took, you know, part of it was my children were being raised, so we didn't have a lot of money to take the vacations, but now if I wanna go see my cousin in St. Louis for a weekend, I'll book it and I'll go. Like, I went at Christmas time and we baked cookies. We didn't do anything. I went and baked cookies and I came home. I do those things for myself now because those little things fill me up. Therapy's not for everyone, but I definitely for me, I need it, right? And it took me a long time to be like, "Well, I don't have the time in my day to take an hour off." I do have the time in my day to take an hour off. Current role supports that, right? So,
Yeah. Mm.
it's tricky, but it's doable, and I think you have to be selfish every now and then. And, when
Mhm.
you think about selfishness, it's not a quality that people list as a pro, right? Especially as women. Like, as women, we kind of are raised, or at least I was, to be quiet, be accommodating, make everyone else in your life happy at the expense of yourself. They don't say that part out loud. They don't say at your own expense. But ultimately down the road, that's what happens. So, when I turned 40, I was like, I'm not doing that anymore. So, and everyone in my life was like, wait, what? What do you mean no? You're saying no to something? And I think it's just things like that. It's like gauging your own doing a body scan, saying like, "I just cannot today. I cannot do that extra thing. I cannot do that whatever." And it's still really hard for me. My initial reaction is to say yes. Yes, I will do that for you. I'll look and see if I can fit it in later, but right now I'm gonna say yes. And I've gotten better at saying, "Let me check."
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I
It's
love
hard though.
that. Yeah, it is hard. Absolutely. I think, like you said, most girls, and regardless of where they're from, what language they speak, we tend to just kind of be the project manager of everyone else's life, right?
Everyone else's comfort. We
Yeah.
wanna make sure everyone is comfortable. And then we sit I mean, there's memes all over the place about moms not eating warm food.
Yeah.
For, like, 12 years of your life, you're eating cold meals.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. And, I think you mentioned about the name of the center called Resilience Center, right?
Maine Resiliency Center, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you about this word, resilience. I mean, I feel like, on social media, you could like have this beautiful reel with this like music as a background, and it's like this woman riding a horse and just like looks really
Warrior,
impactful.
strong warrior, yeah.
Exactly. But I feel like resilient, it's something that happens so quietly behind closed doors. And with your experience, what does that actually look like for you?
So f I that's a very interesting question. I co-facilitate this training called Stress First Aid. We experience stressors in life, all kinds of stressors, good stressors, bad stressors. Like, stress is not just bad. Like,
Yeah.
stress happens, and the way that we become resilient is by,
Hmm.
in a healthy way, popping back into our green zone, right? If you think of it in the color spectrum,
Hmm.
we pop back into our baseline of green, let's call it like. And so we experience a stress, we get cut off in traffic. We take a breath, we keep driving, right? That puts us back into our baseline. And over time, you become resilient to the initial reaction you want to take, which is yell at the guy, whatever. And so I think when you experience big stuff, right? If you have a practice of breathing through stressful situations or having a mindfulness practice, like if you develop that practice, it's a lot easier to go back to baseline as opposed to ending up diagnosed PTSD, right? Because you have tools and you have support systems. And I see a lot of different individuals from that I work with at the Maine Resiliency Center that were at the locations. And some people are thriving. They saw this as life is short, anything can happen. And some people still aren't leaving their homes because they're terrified. And that's okay. Both of them are okay. But it's a matter of being emotionally intelligent. And I don't mean intelligent like smart, but like knowledge of how trauma affects you, knowledge of your vagus nerve and how the brain affects and how you can calm yourself down or how you can bring yourself out of. Some people need medication, some don't. Some end up with a diagnosis of PTSD. That's really only about 5% of the people that end up with diagnosed. Stress isn't bad. You can end up with post traumatic stress that doesn't move into post traumatic stress disorder and flow back and forth from baseline to super stress, from baseline to super stress. And the way that happens is support, tools, educating yourself, practice, whether like I have ADHD, I was just diagnosed, explained a lot of things about my life growing up as a woman. I can't sit and like meditate and like internally visual. I can't sit in that quiet. But like I can take a walk and think about I can ground myself in other ways, right? I can scroll through funny cat videos to take myself out of my depressive moods. Like, it can be as simple as that. But recognizing what you need, I think, and what is mindfulness in your life. Because for some of us, like I do yoga occasionally. We provide that. That's another thing we do is trauma-informed yoga at the Resiliency Center for survivors and for first responders
Hmm.
and allied professionals. And so I'll occasionally go and I'll sit there and I'll be like, my brain is all over the place. I am not focusing on my whatever.
Mm.
I'm not breathing through my feet. Like I don't know what you mean when you tell me to breathe through my feet while I'm in this pose, but for me, I can be
Mhm.
still and relax in that moment, even though my brain is like, so it's different for everybody. I mean, our bodies are different, our minds are different.
Yeah,
But I think
yeah.
just recognizing what works for you and seeking
Mhm.
out, you can try 10 things and only three of them work.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um, that's part of practice. You realize what doesn't work for you and you stay away from what doesn't work from you. Yeah, for you.
yeah. Well, I think that's incredibly useful because resilience is practice, and it's finding that thing that worked for you to bring you back to the baseline. And yeah, it's really different for everyone. I don't think I'm really good at meditation either. I need movement. And I think you said earlier, I mean, like getting your nails done or actually reading something that has absolutely nothing to do with your job.
Yeah.
I think
And
that's
really needs no
yeah.
thought. Like that's the thing. Like I read self-help stuff. I read a lot of things that, through work that I need to read. I don't want to think about what I'm reading or listening to. Like I just want to listen and then like feel good after. And I think that we a lot of times don't think we deserve that time,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but we will give that time to others and we encourage others to take that time for themselves. So it became really a practice of me to say, why are the people that I'm serving good enough to do these things? Why are they worthy of experiencing this for themselves, but I'm not? Like, it's almost like do as I say, not as I do. I think we have to do as we say. We have to do as we say.
Right, right.
It's easy to say, "Well, I'm gonna do that from now on." It's not easy to do that from now on, right? It takes practice.
Yeah. You mentioned that you just wanted to do something that feel good. And I think that sometimes we actually need to give ourselves permission to feel good,
We do.
right? Do you often have to remind the survivors to actually, you get to feel good. It's okay to feel good.
And some accept that and some are like, "Nope." And then you just have to keep reminding them until they say, "Stop calling me. Please don't talk to me anymore. I don't." And that happens. And I think sometimes you have to say, how about I call you every 6 months instead of every week or instead of every month? How about I just check in that way? And they'll say, "That's fine. I can handle hearing from you once a month." Because I'm still a reminder of the awful thing that happened. Even if I'm helpful to you, even if I'm a support to you, even if you cherish me, I am a reminder of what happened that day because I would not know you if it weren't for that day. Odds are, right? A lot of people in my life I know because of homicide, and that is a hard pill to swallow when some of the closest people in my life that I would call if I were broke down on the side of the road, I would not know have their loved ones not been murdered, right? So now we are part of this club that we don't wanna be a part of, but we understand each other, and
Yeah.
I don't wanna be a remi I don't wanna be a reminder of that for them, but it's the reality that it is. So you have to kinda navigate through that reality. And I think be aware as a victim advocate that you wouldn't exist in their lives if not for this act. Recognizing that even just you being part of their lives can be hard for them, even if they are so grateful for you, right?
Yeah. And I think one thing that I'm taking away from this is that you'll maybe sometimes, like, if I wanted to offer help and they reject me and I take it personally, but I think you're really good at not taking that personally because you know that it's not about you.
About me. And sometimes that's really hard. And sometimes they won't know that I take it personally. And then I'll go in the bathroom and shut the door and be like, that really sucked. That hurt my feelings. But it's not me. Like, I really
Yeah,
know
yeah,
that it's because this is hard for them. And you just have to remind yourself. There's a lot of self-talk involved in resiliency, and I mean, you know,
yeah, yeah.
I think I never was one to think about affirmations. Like, I was never one to be like, "Today is a great day. I'm gonna," I was never like that. But now, like, I think about what a goal I have in my life, and, like, my goal is to not harm is to help not harm others with my words and actions, and if I just keep that in the back of my mind, I am there to help and not harm, then it affects
Mm,
my words and actions because it's a mantra in my head, right?
mm,
Take a breath, don't react, think about what you say, think about what you do, think about how this will impact, and that slows up my day a little bit sometimes, but the more you do it, the more it's just I don't even really have to stop and think about it anymore. It's just kind of part of the rhythm of my mind, I guess.
mm. And I ask this to every single guest, and I'm really curious. What is your definition of soft power?
To me, specifically, soft power means having an impact on yourself and others in a kind and compassionate way.
That's really beautiful. I feel I had to sit with that a little bit.
Impact is powerful, and
Yeah.
I could relay the same information in a unkind and non-compassionate way and still get the point across, but probably wouldn't be as powerful.
And one last question is that for any women who are living or currently surviving the unimaginable at this moment in life, what would you say to them?
Give yourself some grace. Be kind to yourself. I think what happened to you doesn't define who you are.
I think that's a really powerful one. Yeah.
And I think sometimes that's really hard to keep.
Yes. I think logically that makes sense, but it's hard to embody what that
Very.
means, right?
And
Yeah.
I think surrounding yourself with supportive people. And the hard part is some people don't have that naturally. They don't have those systems. So build a community or find one. You don't have to build it, just find one.
Yeah. Asking for help, right?
Is really hard. Yeah. I think giving yourself permission to say, and we see this a lot nowadays, it's okay to not be okay, but giving yourself the actual permission to say, I am not okay today. I need something. I might not know what I need. It might need just to call you and say, I'm not okay. And for you to say to them, that's okay. What can I do to help you in your not okayness today?
Mm,
And if they say, I have no idea, you can brainstorm with them.
yeah.
You can say, ooh, let's go take a walk.
Hmm.
Or let's go to the animal shelter and play with puppies and kittens. Or,
Mm,
you know, XYZ.
yeah.
Let's go to the beach.
Let's go shopping. Does
Let's go
shopping
shop.
help?
Could help or harm. But I agree with you. I agree with you. Like that, it's that feeling of even just getting out of the house sometimes for people, even just taking a shower,
That's true.
sometimes just taking a shower
Joanna, thank you so, so much today. And I wanted to thank you for trusting me and this platform and share this
Yeah,
incredible
I
story
appreciate it.
with us. And I think there's so much insight that we can take because I think women in general, we want to help each other. And sometimes if we've never been in that situation, I think it's also really important for us to learn that how to help, how to actually be helpful and understand that. And also just what does resilience actually means? Because it's not a one and done situation.
Right.
Grief is not linear.
It's
Yeah.
not. And there's such a thing as post traumatic growth. We all hear about post traumatic stress, PTSD. We don't hear a lot about post traumatic growth. You can grow from that which broke you.
Thank you so much. And yeah, how do people find you if they're interested? I don't know if that's something that you're
Yeah.
okay
No,
with.
yeah. So I have an email. Maine Resiliency Center. You can look up the Maine Resiliency Center. I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, however anybody you can send them my way. You have my email?
All right. I'm going to have all that information in the show notes. And I do hope that, Joanna, you get a little bit of selfish day today.
Yes, I actually am having lunch with some old coworkers today that from the AG's office, so it's always a great time to get together with them again when I don't see them often.
All right. That sounds really good to me. So thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you
too.
for being here.